15%. That is how much the Earth's air conditioning system has already weakened. It sits beneath the Atlantic Ocean, and it is slowing down faster than at any point in the last 1,000 years. Your weather reports will not tell you this number exists. Right now, a river of warm water flows north from the Caribbean toward Europe. It carries more heat than all the rivers on Earth combined. This is not metaphor. This is the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, AMEC for short, the conveyor belt that keeps Europe habitable. It pushes warm tropical water north. It gives up its heat to the westerly winds that blow across the continent, making London warmer than Calgary, making Paris milder than Fargo. Then the water cools, sinks, returns south at depth. A loop. A cycle. A heartbeat. That heartbeat is weakening. Scientists measure its strength with instruments scattered across the ocean floor, from the subpolar gyre near Greenland to the subtropical gyre near Africa. The data from those instruments tell a story most people have never heard. 15% weaker than it was in the mid-20th century, weaker than at any point in the last millennium. Not a prediction, a measurement, already happening. And the models that predict its future behavior have been consistently too optimistic. Every new observation comes in worse than the projection. The heartbeat is not just slowing. It is accelerating toward a stop. If that unsettles you, stay, because this is exactly the kind of story the rest of the coverage looks away from. To understand what this means, you have to understand what the current actually does. It is a heat redistribution system on a planetary scale. The tropics receive more solar energy than the poles. Without a mechanism to move that excess heat north, the equator would grow uninhabitably hot while the poles froze solid. The AMOC is that mechanism. It pulls heat from the south and deposits it in the north, like moving a radiator from the equator to the Arctic. Europe is the primary beneficiary. London sits at the same latitude as Winnipeg. Paris aligns with Calgary. Without the current, Europe would be a much colder, much harsher place. This is not abstract geography. This is the thermostat of your everyday life. But there is a second effect nobody talks about. The AMOC does not just warm Europe. It shapes the rains that fall across the Sahel. It regulates the monsoons that feed hundreds of millions of people in Africa and Asia. When the current weakens, the heat stays in the south. The tropical rain belts shift. The Sahel dries. The monsoons fail. A 15% weakening has already rearranged rainfall patterns across West Africa. Famine in Somalia. Droughts in the Sahel. These are not separate tragedies. They are symptoms of the same system losing its strength. The ocean current that keeps your winter bearable is the same one that keeps someone else's harvest alive. You want to know what a full collapse looks like? Look back 12,000 years. Scientists call it the Younger Dryas, a period when the AMOC shut down almost completely, triggered by a pulse of fresh water from melting glaciers in North America. For 1,200 years, Europe returned to Ice Age conditions. Temperatures dropped by 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. Forests became tundra. The sea froze far south of Iceland. Archaeological records show human populations collapsing across northern Europe. The few who survived retreated to refuges in the south. This is not theoretical. This is in the geological record. It happened. It was caused by precisely the kind of disruption we are now creating. Stop. Think about that for a second. The last time the current stopped, there were maybe 10 million people on the entire planet. Most of them were hunter-gatherers. Today there are 800 million people in Europe alone. Another billion in the regions whose rains depend on the same circulation pattern. We are running the same experiment on a planet with 100 times the population. The Younger Dryas was a climate shock. A full AMOC collapse today would be a civilizational one. Now here is what they will not tell you about the current situation. Scientists knew the AMOC was weakening, but for years the official projections treated a full collapse this century as low probability. Then came the 2025 assessment from the NOAA Arctic Report Card. It revised those odds upward substantially. A full collapse before 2100 is now considered plausible under high-emission scenarios. Not impossible. Not unprecedented. Plausible. And the observation record keeps breaking. Freshwater from Greenland's melting ice sheet is flooding the North Atlantic. That freshwater is lighter than salt water. It sits on top. It prevents the sinking that drives the entire circulation. We are pouring the very substance that can stop the pump directly into the intake. This is where the conspiracy theories start. The same pattern we saw with heat. When people sense something real is being left out of the story, some reach for the idea that the disruption is being manufactured. Through weather modification programs, through secret technologies, through deliberate climate warfare. The intuition is again correct. The explanation is again wrong. The facility that gets blamed for weather modification operates at a scale of a few megawatts. The energy embodied in the AMOC is measured in petawatts. The difference is not a few orders of magnitude. It is 15. Trying to steer the Atlantic circulation with a few megawatts of directed energy is the same as trying to stop a freight train by breathing on it. The honest conclusion is more unsettling than any conspiracy. No one is controlling this. No one is steering it. The system is responding to what we have already done. The Shijano. 1. We have already emitted. The Shijano. Quaden Sout. 1 Mard. We have already emitted. The warmth we have already added. And the physics of that response does not care about our politics, our ideologies, our comfort with the story. By now you can see the pattern. It is the same pattern we watched with the wet bulb threshold. The distance between what the thermometer shows and what the Earth is actually doing. The gap between headline news and the system underneath. The AMOC is not a heatwave. It is not a storm. It is not something you can capture in a single dramatic image. It is a river beneath the ocean. It is a heartbeat beneath the surface. It moves so slowly that a collapse could take decades. But once it crosses the threshold, there is no stopping it. This is the most dangerous kind of threat. The kind that does not announce itself loudly. The kind that weakens quietly, year by year, until one day the loop simply ceases. And the most important fact in all of this is that the collapse is not inevitable. The same modeling that projects a plausible collapse this century also shows a stable system if emissions peak and decline fast enough. The window is not closed, but it is narrowing, and it is narrowing faster than mainstream coverage reflects. The difference between the world where the current stabilizes and the world where it shifts to a new, weaker state is measured in choices that have not yet been made. None of this asks you to despair. It asks you to see clearly. Because you cannot fix what you do not understand. And you cannot understand what the headlines will not tell you. Step back. Look at where all of this leaves us. We are watching two planetary systems that most people have never heard of. Both weakening. Both responding to the same underlying driver. The wet bulb threshold is the heat your body cannot survive. The AMOC is the climate system that makes your weather survivable. One decides whether your cells keep running. The other decides whether your crops keep growing. Both are moving in the wrong direction. Both are closer than we were told. And both are still subject to the physics of a world where we have not yet made the choices that would change their trajectories. The ocean current is not a dial on a wall. It is a system with momentum. It will keep slowing for decades even if we stopped all emissions tomorrow. But how far it slows, whether it stabilizes at a weaker state or collapses entirely, those outcomes depend on what we do in this decade. If you are watching this from Europe, you already feel the edges of the shift. The heat domes that sit longer, the winters that arrive later and leave softer, the rainfall that no longer falls where it used to. If you are watching this from North Africa or the Sahel, you feel it differently. In the length of the dry season, in the shrinking of the harvest, in the decision to leave a land that no longer feeds you. These are not separate stories. They are chapters of the same system, and the chapter is still being written. The thermometer outside your window measures the air. It cannot measure the river beneath the ocean. It cannot measure the rain that failed to reach your field or the winter that arrived too late. The number is climbing quietly underneath the headlines. In the meltwater pouring off Greenland. In the salt being pulled into the depths. In the silence of a current that has been running since before human civilization began. The Earth has thermostats. We have only recently learned how to read them. The one that keeps Europe warm is weakening. The one that governs the body's survival is rising. Both are real. Both are moving. And both are still ours to influence. Now here is what you actually do about it. Demand emissions cuts at the speed the physics requires. Support adaptation plans that treat the AMOC as a live risk, not a distant one. And pay attention to the science that does not make the front page. The ocean's silence is not peace. It is the sound of a system losing its rhythm. The only question still open is whether we notice in time to do something about it. Subscribe. Stay for the next one. And if this changed how you see the ocean, tell someone who needs to hear it.